Hello, everyone. It's Wunmi here. Hello, everyone in the Women Enriching Women group. How are you this evening? I hope you're all well, whether you're going to be watching us from, whether from the Philippines or from the US and here in the UK. And I've got on the hot seat tonight a very, very wonderful lady. Aneeta Prem, the founder of Freedom Charity. She's been campaigning for women for over 10 years around dishonour abuse, and she's passionate about women and girls. Yeah, she's the author of What Is Not Fair and the founder of Freedom Charity UK. Welcome, Aneeta.
Good evening. Hi. Hope everyone's really well.
Yeah, good, good, good. Good to have you here. Good to have you here. So, can you tell the audience a bit about yourself and what led you to found Freedom Charity UK?
So, Freedom Charity was set up, as you were saying, just over 10 years ago. I was born in Bethnal Green, a Cockney, so that's in London, in the United Kingdom, and come from a very ordinary family, I think, from a very loving family. And my parents originally come from Himachal Pradesh, that's northern India. And I was brought up in an environment where girls were treated exactly the same as boys. It's just my sister Vanita and I, and my mum and dad. And I didn't know there was disparity, that women and girls would be treated differently, because in our household there was complete equality. So I was really surprised growing up and discovering that in many, many societies, women and girls were treated appallingly. They weren't given the basic human rights, they were abused. And it was something that when I discovered it, probably at the age of 17, was incredibly shocking. I was the youngest black belt karate instructor in the United Kingdom that had my own karate clubs. And when I was running my clubs, I discovered then the whole issue of forced marriage and what that was. And I had no concept of any type of abuse like that, because I didn't come from that culture, that background, and being exposed to it very young really shocked me. And I think that was the foundations why I knew I had to do something about it. I mean, for me, it's not leaving it for somebody else. It's something that I have to take responsibility for.
Thank you. And what really is dishonour abuse and forced marriages when you think about it? What does that really entail?
So many people use the term honour-based violence. That's completely the wrong thing to say. When we talk about anything, language is really important. So we use the term dishonour. And if you use the term honour, you're almost pandering to perpetrators. And that's something we can't do. When we talk about the issue of, say, for example, forced marriage, what does that mean? That means someone is forced to get married against their will. Pretty simple concept. We're not against arranged marriages. Arranged marriages, when you're introduced to someone, you might be introduced to 1, 2, 3, 4, 1,000 people. You can say no as many times as you want. But as soon as the freedom to choose is taken away from you, that's a forced marriage. So why did I initially set the charity up with Lord Harris to campaign to make this a criminal offence? Because if what crimes forced marriage leads to? It leads to domestic abuse. It leads to slavery. It can lead to serial rape, and ultimately it can lead to murder in the most serious cases. So when we use the term dishonour abuse, when we use the term forced marriage, we're using that terminology to encompass a whole array of abuses that could be seen as cultural practices against women and girls, and sometimes boys too. So it's very important that we all do something about it to make a difference, to protect all the girls in the world that are suffering abuse.
That's amazing. That really is amazing. So it's actually more than just, so there's a difference between forced marriages and actually arranged marriages.
Yeah,
When you
really.
give the freedom to choose, then it's actually dishonoring the woman.
Yes, and we campaigned very hard. When I set the charity up, I met the Prime Minister at the time, I met the Home Secretary, I met the Women's Minister, and I said, we need to talk about language. We need to make this a criminal offence. And they said, well, it doesn't affect many girls and women in the United Kingdom, so why should we be worried about it? And I said, if this was affecting white middle-class girls that were being taken abroad, forced to get married against their will, being serially raped, they'd be 3 times more likely to take their own lives. This would already be a criminal offence. What's the difference that we're talking about women and girls from different communities? Why does that make it okay for them to be abused in this way by their family? By the people you trust most in the world, your parents, your immediate family. You wouldn't expect them to do anything that would cause you harm. You wouldn't expect them to trick you and force you to get married, often to your first cousin. That's completely barbaric. It's completely wrong. When you're in pain, when you're in danger, you rely on your parents, your mother, your carers to do the right thing. But these are the people that are forcing their daughters into marriage against their will. The youngest case I've had with me is a 6-year-old child with
What?
special needs that was being forced into marriage that I was asked by a school to interview. And the oldest is an 81-year-old lady who was forced to marry for immigration and inheritance. It crosses cultures, it crosses class, it crosses boundaries, and there isn't one particular culture or class it comes from. It crosses all sectors of community, and it happens all around the world.
Wow. So is it a criminal offense then to actually force someone to marry you now?
So one of the things that I'm really proud of that we've done at Freedom Charity, we were instrumental in making forced marriage a crime in the United Kingdom. And that was a lot of hard work, a lot of lobbying, a lot of campaigning, but it did become a crime, and I'm really proud of that. So if someone forces anyone into marriage, it could lead to up to 7 years imprisonment.
Wow.
So that's a deterrent. And what we do is to prevent it from happening. There's lots of organisations that are involved in rescues. We do rescues too. But our main key area is to stop this from happening in the first place. Through education, we can eradicate these crimes in a generation. So when I set the charity up, I thought, how can I speak to young people? And I thought, well, maybe we could make a film, a Channel 4, a really contemporary film that would be talking to young people today. And we just didn't have the funds. So I spoke to the Home Office, I spoke to the government, and they said, why don't you write a book? So I wrote a book called But It's Not Fair. And this is a copy of it here. And we have donated 65,000 copies of my books to children across the United Kingdom. And each book that goes into a home could potentially save a life, because we have girls that we know are being home educated in the loosest sense of the word. Their parents have taken them out of education. They're at home waiting to be forced into a marriage. And the book comes home. For many children, it's the first book they've ever owned, which I think is an absolute tragedy. In 2022, we've got children that don't have their own books at home. They've donated a book, and we've had girls that have contacted the Freedom Helpline or used the Freedom Charity app to contact us and ask us to help them because they're about to be forced into marriage or even go through female genital mutilation. I know it's something we're talking about as well this evening.
Yes.
So we've been campaigning very hard to get this recognised in schools. We've visited hundreds of schools, seen thousands of children, educated teachers, social services, police, border agency to spot the signs so we can prevent this from happening.
Thank you. Before we go on, you said you do rescues too. So what do you mean by that?
So, for example, I'll give you an example. We had a 17-year-old girl that contacted the helpline to say that she had heard her parents, overheard them talking about getting her married to her first cousin. And it was going to be in a few weeks' time. So she was still in school. She was doing her exams. It was coming up towards the end of her exams. And her last day at school was the last day she saw her parents, because she discovered that this was on the Thursday. On the Friday, they had booked a plane ticket to take her back to her country of origin, although she was a UK citizen, the family's country of origin, and they were going to get her married to her first cousin. So she contacted us as a charity. We managed to intervene. We managed to get to her. She got on a coach. She chucked every single item that she owned away. She had a mobile phone, she had a computer, and she threw them away because she was convinced her parents would be tracking her. So she's now on a coach, penniless, terrified, with a bounty now on her head. We pick her up at the coach station. We managed to get her into a hostel. That's really not an easy thing to do. And that's the last place these girls want to be. They want to be at home with loving family. But we're taking them away from that because their parents won't listen. They will go against court orders. So we managed to rescue her, put her in a hostel, eventually got her name changed. moved her to another part of the country for her to start her life again. That should be a happy ending, shouldn't it? But these girls are really isolated. They're living on limited benefits and they're struggling. And for many girls, because they have no funding, they have no friends, they then end up often going back to the perpetrators, their families. So we have to make sure we have a cushion, we have a way to make sure that they don't go back to their families, to people that will force them into marriage. That's really important. So we have to put a whole system in place to protect them, a befriending service. You know, and one of the things when I rescue a girl is that I insist that they learn my phone number, because if they're anywhere else in the world, they can contact me and we will try and get them back. And we have rescued girls from all around the world and brought them back to the United Kingdom. But when we've rescued them, Wunmi, they've faced enormous trauma. They've been abused, they've been raped, they've been terrorized, they've been treated as slaves, and they feel that there's no hope, you know. And if we don't get to the girls in time, my fear is they'll take their own lives, and some do.
Wow. So you've seen cases where girls have taken their own lives?
Unfortunately, I have. Unfortunately. And, you know, you never forget those people. It's heartbreaking, but that makes us more determined. In their name, we're going to ensure that we can not allow this to happen to anyone else. And we believe in a generation we can prevent it. If we can talk to young men and young girls in school and make sure that they're the generation that stops this from happening in the future, we're halfway there, aren't we? You know, to try and convince parents and grandparents to alter their views is very difficult, but the next generation is a generation we're talking to ensure it doesn't happen in the future.
And is that why you go into schools? Because you're talking about the next generation.
Exactly why schools are our key target audience, because if we can talk to young men now to know that they could be the heroes of the future, you know, stop demonizing boys and saying they're bad. They're not. We need to make sure that they have responsibilities, they know what could potentially happen to young women and girls, and making them modern day heroes. And they love that concept, that they can do something about this.
That is amazing. That is amazing. So that's going to lead us to, it's about targeting the next generation, really. Bring them on board to know that this is not right for women and girls, that this is not a good thing to do. And empowering them, especially boys, as you say, empowering them to actually see that, you know what, I don't want to do this as my parents or my grandparents did. Yeah.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
And that's, you know, when we were working on forced marriage, the government said to me, this is part of the national curriculum, it's being taught. Would you do something on the area of female genital mutilation? And that's a really difficult topic. You know, 200 million women and girls worldwide have gone through female genital mutilation or cutting. I'll abbreviate to FGM, but it's horrendous crime where girls are cut for no good reason, for no medical reason, in the most barbaric of circumstances, in most cases. And, you know, for me, going into schools, talking about this is probably one of the most difficult things we have to do. I just spoke to, for International Women's Day, spoke to hundreds of children in schools in London. And what was really encouraging was the boys were the ones that wanted to make a difference. We're running a campaign called Not in My Name. And every boy stood up and said, not in my name. Do not cut another girl because I don't want it to happen. And parents say, boys demand it, men demand it, otherwise these girls won't get married. That's simply not true, Wunmi. It's not true. And if we tell them about it and educate them early enough, they will be the generation. You know, we can end female genital mutilation in a generation through education, through going out there, talking about it and not being scared to talk about it. Many people are terrified. I was involved in the first criminal conviction in the United Kingdom, but, you know, there haven't been enough. There's only been one conviction in the whole of the United Kingdom, and we know maybe 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 girls a year in the United Kingdom are cut. 200 million women and girls worldwide are cut. This is completely unacceptable.
Is it because they see this as a cultural norm that can be passed down? Because when you talk about there's fear about talking about it, I've seen that, is it because it's seen as cultural anyway? I heard it. What's the big deal about circumcision or cutting? Is that the reason why people don't want to talk about it? What is the problem, really?
The real reason is that people haven't spoken ever about women being cut, about the term vagina, about the clitoris being removed and a woman being sewn up, a girl being sewn up with just a tiny hole left for one drop of urine to come out at a time. We don't talk about this. It's been kept a secret for generation after generation. And there's so much superstition around this. They're saying the clitoris is an extension of the male penis. We know that's nonsense. We know it's not true. But if you're grown up in a society, in a culture where nobody speaks about it, you might believe this is true. I did a school assembly and we were talking about superstitions and myths of FGM. And there was about 1,000 people in the audience. And this girl, I was aware that was just staring at me the whole time, but not in a positive way, very negative. And when we started to talk about superstitions and myths, halfway through, she got up and she was red with anger. And she said to me, "You're lying." And I said, "What am I lying about?" She said, "I have been cut to keep me pure. I have been cut because the female genitalia is evil. If I'm not cut, no one will marry me. If my clitoris wasn't removed, I'm dirty and impure." I was completely horrified. It's not what any of us expected to hear in this assembly, and we were all incredibly concerned for this young girl. Of course, she received counselling and help afterwards, but that was her true belief because that's what her family had told her. And she was completely sworn to secrecy. She was told that she couldn't tell anybody about this. And many, many girls don't know they've even been cut. They've been cut as newborn babies, so they have no way of knowing. It's only when often a woman is going through childbirth and she's being seen by a midwife, it's picked up. But they have no way of knowing. I mean, I want to share a story with you, and it's quite difficult, but I'm going to share it because I want people to feel uncomfortable, because unless we know about this, how are we going to deal with it? Go back to when you're 5 years old with me. Go back to that really special birthday party that you had as a child. If you can, maybe just close your eyes and just focus on that. Remember a time when you're joyous and happy. And I'm going to change this young woman's name to Sarah. So when I was writing my book, Cut Flowers, I interviewed a number of people. But one of the women I interviewed, Sarah, her story sticks in my mind to this day. She was telling me about her 5th birthday party. And for her birthday party, she was going to have all the girls from the village and boys coming over to celebrate. And there'll be lots of food and festivities and dancing. And she was promised her own prayer mat. And she was allowed to choose the colours. And she felt very overwhelmed by having that freedom of choice. And she chose the colours, and it was a day of her party, and she knew her prayer mat was being made because she would go after school to see the lady making it for her, weaving it for her. And the day of the party came, her friends were there, her hair was braided, she had a new dress, and there was singing, dancing, and lots of festivity, and she was super excited. And towards the end of the party, her mother said to all the girls, "Come on, we're going out, and there's more celebrations." And that's exactly what happened. They were led into the forest, and she was being the smallest. Sarah was at the very end, and one by one, the girls were taken into a hut. And Sarah was getting really cross because she was thinking, someone's going to choose my prayer mat and I'm not going to get this. And she was trying to push herself forward, but she didn't. She was at the very back. And finally, it was her turn. And she was so excited. She was lifted up into the air and she squealed with delight. And then she was blindfolded. And that added to the excitement, the adrenaline. But then her underwear was removed and she knew that was bad. And she tried to scream. Something was put into her mouth to stop her screaming. She was gagged. And then Sarah told me she was placed on something very cold, like a bench. She felt her legs being opened forcibly, and then the worst pain ever she experienced between her legs. And she tried to scream, but she couldn't because there was this gag in her mouth, and all she wanted was her mother to come and save her. The pain didn't stop. There was additional pain. And then, as the gag was removed, she screamed for her mum. And her mum was standing there as the blindfold was removed, and she was desperate for her mother to help and support her and stop whatever it was that had happened. But it was her mother standing there with a razor blade. Her mother had performed female genital mutilation. The pain didn't stop as rose thorns were inserted into her. Sarah was left for 3 days in the hut with the other girls. She was lying next to her sister, alone, terrified with the other girls. All the adults had left her. And her sister sadly died of the infection when the adults came to collect her. You know, this isn't something I'm talking about that doesn't happen. 200 million women and girls go through this, from newborn babies all the way up to teenage girls, because they believe they're keeping their daughters pure. And she told me that on her wedding night, her husband was given a gift of a knife by his mother to cut her open on her wedding night. And she said every time she had intercourse, the pain was excruciating. Every time she had a period, the blood would drop one drop at a time, and she would continually have infection after infection. And she told me of many girls that she knew that died. She had no sexual pleasure, only pain. Continual urine infection. That's what FGMC is. It's completely barbaric, and we have the power to stop it by educating young people, not being scared to talk about it. When I started talking about it, everyone said to me, you're going to get death threats. People will not accept that you are talking about something so culturally sensitive. And I said, if I can just save one girl, there is no price on that. So I wrote my book, Cut Flowers. Yeah. And we've donated this as well. So hundreds and hundreds and thousands of copies to children. And it's also got lesson plans. Both my books have lesson plans, so it can be taught in school in a very safe way. Because it's very important that when we talk about it, we use child-appropriate language, and don't apologise for the language. We use medical terminology when we discuss it with young people, generally 11 all the way up to university students, trained social workers, midwives, A&E staff, border agency, so they know what to look out for. You may have noticed with me, I'm wearing a badge.
Yes, I can see that badge. Yes, I can.
Now, the badge represents the female form. This is the internationally recognised symbol against FGM, and Freedom invented that. I invented that when I was writing my book. And it's a red triangle with a heart in the centre. And the heart is to say we can make a difference. And I wear it on the left-hand side because that's where the heart is. A simple act of wearing a badge means you start a conversation, and the funds raised from that help the charity. So each badge raised means that we can donate a book to a child in a school. And that's crucially important because it's through education, through giving. When you go into a school, you want to give a child a gift. That's a normal thing to do. Mm-hmm. And for us, giving a sustainable gift of a book that they take home is really important. And the back of the book has help pages explaining to teachers, professionals, and to the young person themselves all the different signs, what they need to look out for, and what practical help is there for them. Because without that, how are we going to make a difference? We can't be scared of the conversation. We can't be scared to be called racist. We can't be scared to deal with difficult issues. And I'm proud of the work that Freedom Charity does in going into schools and talking to young people, talking to their teachers, talking to their dinner staff, talking to everybody, from the person that meets them at the gate to the person that helps them cross the road to their head teacher. So safeguarding is at the heart of everything we do, and making sure boys understand this issue. Because I went to a school and they said, we don't want the boys to know about this because it will be too disturbing, or they will just be traumatized. But women and mothers are doing this because they say boys demand it. So we have to talk to boys. And the school I went to for International Women's Day, they sat the children, boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl. And that was really interesting, because when I said to the boys, stand up and roar at the top of your voice, not in my name, I don't want a girl cutting my name. Every boy stood up and roared it at the top of their voice. And the girls were in floods of tears and grateful that, of course, we want girls to be empowered to help each other and women to be empowered. But I also wanted boys to be part of our conversation. And it was amazing. And we do that in every school we go to. We do that in every setting. And if someone dares not stand up, they're questioned as to why they wouldn't. And actually, they could be potential perpetrators. So it's very important that we bring them along with us. And actually, if you get people young enough, you can change opinions, because no one's discussing this at home. So the first time they hear about it will be in a safe environment in school, where there's counselling and support offered, because some of the girls, as I say, have already gone through female genital mutilation. I mean, I did an audience a few years ago, and one of the men in the audience, I felt very bravely or very stupidly, stood up and said, I completely disagree. Girls have to be cut. And I said, why? Why have girls got to be cut? And there were about 800 women in the audience all ready to lynch this chap. And he said, well, I've got 3 daughters and I'm keeping them pure. My daughters are not going to be raped because I've had them sewn up, and on their wedding night, they'll be opened. And I said, your daughters will have infection. Your daughters have risked dying. This hasn't been done in a clinical environment. This has been done for non-medical reasons. And the most common type of FGM in the United Kingdom is type 3, where the clitoris is removed and when the labia is completely sewn up, as I say, just leaves in one tiny hole for 1 drop of urine or period at a time. And girls talk about the amount of suffering and pain they have.
That is trauma. I mean, that's just so traumatic for the girls.
And they don't know why. Many don't know why and think this is completely normal. You know, at one of the conferences, I was using the bathroom. I was having a pee. And when I stood outside, these women were there. And I was like, oh, okay, why are you standing there? And they said, that's nice to hear, a nice, healthy woman peeing. And I was like, oh, my goodness, this is a bit scary. And I said, what are you talking about? And they said, well, one of the women said to me, look, I've been cut. I know you're talking about FGM. She said, but when I go to the toilet, it takes me 20 minutes and it burns. And 1 drop of urine comes out at a time. And so you have no idea how painful it is. I live on antibiotics. I'm in constant pain. And she said, so, you know, the fact you can go to the bathroom normally, it doesn't, you know, you don't even think about those very, very simple, basic human rights. Being able to go to the toilet is a basic human right that's been taken away. Any form of sexual pleasure is taken away. So we have to challenge all of those things. I mean, our new campaign at the moment has been around virginity testing.
Yes. And what is that really? Because I saw you on TV talking about virginity testing. What is virginity testing?
So virginity testing has been going on for generations. It's been going on from all types of people of backgrounds, where a young woman, pre-marriage, has somebody in the community, generally a community elder woman, will place 2 fingers, try and place 2 fingers inside her vagina. And if she can place the fingers inside, that means that she is not a virgin. So that means that she's unclean. That means that she can't get married, and she'll have a life of being ostracized and ridiculed. Well, this virginity test is completely ridiculous, because not every girl is born with a hymen. That's what they're trying to see, is the hymen intact. If they've used any sanitary products that they insert, it wouldn't be intact. You know, for 100 different reasons, why the hymen might not be there. As I say, she might not have been born with it. She might have broken when she's been doing sports. She may have had intercourse. Probably she hasn't. And so the families are demanding on the wedding night, there is blood on the sheet to prove she's a virgin. It proves nothing. I mean, I had a woman speak to me, 18-year-old, she was still a girl really in my opinion, that she had been raped, and on her wedding night she wouldn't bleed, and she was terrified of what was going to happen to her. And she hadn't told her family because they wouldn't have accepted that, because it was an uncle that raped her. And she was asking for £3,000 to have something called hymenoplasty, where a piece of skin is put over the vagina, a very tiny piece of skin. And so on her wedding night, she would bleed. And clinics in London are charging £400 for a virginity test. Girls that go through these tests say it feels like they've been sexually abused. It's often now, if it's not done by someone in the community, it might be done in a backstreet chemist or in a Harley Street clinic.
I saw that on TV actually.
Yeah, so we exposed that on TV, and I had a number of girls that came to us that talked about it. And we were the first charity that really exposed virginity testing, and I've been campaigning for years for that to be a crime. Well, in a couple of months, this is going to be a crime in the United Kingdom, as is hymenoplasty. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that we can stop this from happening. If it does happen, it's a criminal offence, and the perpetrators, people that are doing this, can go to prison. And parents who are part of the marriage proposal is, we want to see a photograph of your daughter. We want to see her education qualifications. Can she cook? Okay. And does she have a virginity test certificate to prove to us that she's a virgin? What right have people got to demand this? And parents feel obliged to do this and force their daughters to have these tests. And if their daughter doesn't come up passing this virginity test, then they're forced to give their daughter a hymenoplasty. Unnecessary, barbaric surgery that proves nothing, leaves a girl with a lifetime of trauma. And the fear, if she doesn't bleed, that she could be potentially killed by the groom's family. And it's just horrible. You know, none of these tests men are subjected to, because there isn't such a test for boys and men. But women are treated so appallingly that it's only through campaigning, educating, insisting, demanding that laws are changed that we can make a difference. And that's what Freedom Charity does. That's what I do tirelessly to ensure that we can protect the most vulnerable in society. And, you know,
I think some of these women would really go through that and be depressed. Is there high sense of depression at all with all these kind of things happening to women?
There is high level of depression. There's a high level of stress. There's a high level of self-harming. And, you know, where girls don't value themselves, where they believe that they have no basic human rights. They're taken out of school early. They're not being allowed to have an education. They're told their life is to become a baby machine. Well, if you want to have children, fantastic. That's your choice, but not a demand, not something that prevents you from doing all the other things that you may want to do as well as before or after. But the fact girls are not given a choice, they're taken out of education. You know, many girls are taken out of education in the United Kingdom as young as 12. They stopped having an education, so their parents are preparing them for marriage.
How could that happen, though? How does that really happen? Because it's supposed to be what are going missing. So how does that really happen in United Kingdom? I just don't get that.
Well, often parents say they're home educating their children, their daughters, and there aren't the checks done. Or if there are, they come home and they say, well, yes, my daughter's studying, and that's it. Or they move from county to county and place to place, and people are just not keeping an eye on what's going on. And that's why we say to the girls' friends, you need to have a good network around you. So if you're taken out of school, your friends can raise the alarm. On my book, But It's Not Fair, the tagline is reading this book could save your best friend's life. And we've had many, many friends report the fact that their girlfriends have come, their friends from school, female friends have been taken out of school. They haven't come back after the summer holidays. They're worried they could have been forced into marriage, and we've been able to intervene and save lives. And that's why schools and education is so important. The PSHE Association have got lesson plans that go with my books. And so it's part of the national curriculum. When we've been into schools, people have turned it into plays, which is fantastic as an author to see that. They've made songs about the work that we've done. And it's just enlightening to know that young people can make such a difference, that they will be there to protect each other. And we are there as educators, Wunmi, as professionals, to make a difference. That's what I'm hoping the whole audience will do, to come together to make a difference, to have the conversation, not to be embarrassed about it. Because, I can talk to 10-year-olds about many of these issues, and they're very matter of fact, and they want to do something about it. And they're not embarrassed by language. They just want to be told the truth.
Well done for what you do. So just we're going to be bringing this to an end. What's the way forward for some women who may have gone through some of these things and they're still living in shame? How can they get out of that?
You know what? Come and speak to either you or me, Wunmi. Come to Freedom Charity. Come and speak to you. We are here to help you, to hear you, and we will put you in touch with other people that will help you through this journey. You should not be suffering alone. We should embrace you and ensure that you have all the help, support. There's a lot of mental illness around this. There's a lot of depression, and we are certainly there to make a difference. And we are there to ensure that the young girls in the future, they don't suffer from female genital mutilation or cutting or forced marriage or virginity testing or breast styling or any type of dishonour. We have to end this in a generation.
What is breast styling? Could you just, before we end, what is breast styling?
Breast styling is where young girls, often about 11, 12, the mothers often will use hot stones to pummel the girl's chest to prevent their breast from growing. And the reasoning is, if they have a breast and it's developing, they could be raped. So they're trying to suppress the breast from growing. And by pummeling them, massaging them vigorously on a daily basis, they can prevent this from happening. But it can cause a huge amount of trauma, can lead to severe internal damage while this is being conducted. And no one really talks about this. We've been talking about it. It's child abuse. All of these crimes we're talking about in children is child abuse and has to end.
Thank you. Breast ironing, you said it has to end.
It has to end.
It has to end. All these bias, cultural bias and norms, they have to end, as she said. And what is your website again? I just want people to just people know how to reach you properly. Yeah.
So if you go to freedomcharity.org.uk, you'll find Freedom Charity. We're desperate for your help and support. We can't do this on our own. We've got thousands, millions of young people worldwide. We need to educate to prevent this from happening. And it's only united, women united, the race united, we can prevent this in a generation. Through education, we will eradicate these types of crime.
Thank you so much. Through education, we will eradicate these types of crimes against men that actually limit them, cause so much depression, and is really just another form of abuse and bias. Yeah, so thank you so much, Aneeta Prem, for being on tonight's very special edition, yes, of Women Unlimited, breaking the bias, advancing beyond the bias and barriers. It's good to have you here this evening. I really appreciate it. And on that note, we're going to say good night tonight. Yeah, good night. Thank you all for watching. Thank you.